Hello, it's Derek from PE. How are you doing? I would like to address a question I hear very often, which is how long does it take to learn web development? Or how long will it take me to learn web development? Or what people probably really mean, how long will it take for me to somehow gather the skills and experience to be hireable as a web developer, which I think is something they don't consciously think about enough. However, I was talking to Jewel the other day, and it spun off this whole conversation, and we were talking about time and timelines and how to visualize those things. And we worked through something, and I'd like to do that now just to have a visual way to kind of represent this. Because I think culturally and just as a society and as humans, we're not very good at planning. I'll tell you, I did not make a whole lot of plans for poor future Derek for his intense retirement needs and things like that. Or, for example, I have a hard time thinking I shouldn't eat this delicious, crazy food right now because later I want to be healthier. Or I don't think I should go running or work out, or I should do whatever it is for future Derek. It's very hard when we are looking at our little phones and they're going beep beep beep, and we're like, oh, somebody liked my thing. It's hard to get in touch with nature and time, the timeline, and to actually think, oh, it's winter again. I'm going to plant these types of vegetables, or there's a holiday, life is passing, and we're seeing the years and the children grow up. No, instead we're like, wah, 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 wait, what? Who? Oh, I can't pay attention. Oh, I'm trying to read this and go to the bathroom and watch this at the same time. So, so it's a pandemic, really. People are not saving up for retirement. People are not doing financial planning. There's some stats in the United States that pretty much everybody would be destitute if their car breaks down. So let's just take this time to think about it, the reality of it. How much time does it take to learn web development? And it's going to depend on the person, for one thing. I mean, you could just go read all of those books. Is that going to be the right thing for you to do? Probably not. You might get a course. Is that the right thing to do? Who knows? I mean, probably not. I mean, if you're just to throw darts out at anything out there, it's probably the wrong thing. So that's another problem. It doesn't matter how long you spend if you're doing the wrong thing, right? You can't just go digging in the backyard and find JavaScript down there or like magically learn something. It's complicated. So just like a designer or a programmer might do, let's break it down visually and explore and incrementally learn more about it. It's cold in here today. Okay, I am going to use FigJam, which is a collaborative whiteboarding tool. You could obviously do this on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper or any tool you want. It doesn't really matter. It's just for divergent thinking, getting some ideas out there on the proverbial table. I don't know if that's really a proverb, but the metaphorical table? I don't know. You tell me. What is the word for this? It's not a real table, but I'm using it like a table. I'm going to just make a square, because maybe that can be a unit of time. But I'm a little concerned. I don't know how big anything is. So small, this is small text. SAML text, small text, it says right here. So just kind of planning ahead for my context. How big do I want these things to be? Maybe large text would be like a heading, timeline or something. Okay, and then maybe this would be a sitting, some amount of sitting of learning. I guess I don't really need that to have any words on it, but a sitting I think would be 2 to 3 hours, and I'm talking average, so let's just say 3 hours. 2 to 3 hours, but really, 3 hours, come on. It takes time to sit down, takes some time to get in the zone or whatever. Everybody's zone's different, and I don't know, 3 hours. So if it takes you 6 hours to get 3 hours of time because of your brain and your environment and the way that you work and all of your past history and the support of your family and friends, well, your hours are going to be more. But we need to think about it in terms of actual focused time. So 3 hours of focused time. That's what I'm going to say this block is. All right. So I think, based on my experience, which is, I didn't go to school for education, but I have accidentally educated a lot of people over the last decade. And I think based on all the things I did wrong when I was learning web development, and then later all the things I did right, and then all of these books and courses, you should see the list of courses that I've either taken for my own purposes or audited for other people's purposes. All the people I've met at meetups, the tens of thousands of questions on Stack Overflow and in all the various forums over the years, and Slack and Discord, and just all the people I've worked with and everything. I think that you could say it's going to take at least 1,000 hours to learn whatever. Whatever it is, really. They say, I can't remember his name right now, but there's a book where he says something about 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. And I don't know. I don't think that really makes sense either. What is it? Malcolm Gladwell, I think. And that depends. We're not talking about that. The goal here isn't to try to put in enough time to be the master of something. I'm talking about any industry, any job, any role that requires a lot of technical expertise and skill. You're going to need at least 1,000 hours to get into it. And I would say, as a junior web developer or somebody who can actually be useful on a team, you're probably going to need a good 1,000 hours. I mean, depending on how supportive the team is, right? If your friend hires you or your brother hires you at his company and they can train you up. But you're going to have to get that 1,000 hours somewhere, and that might be on the job if you're lucky in those sorts of situations. I've been in situations where we had interns, and I just wanted to teach the interns to do my job so I wouldn't have to do my job. Plus, they were also go-getters and just learned it really fast. So there's lots of different situations, but we're talking about the average person who's thinking to themselves, I want to get into web development. What does that timeline look like? I'm going to say 600 to 1,200 to never, to infinite, right? I think that if you have the right tools, the right feedback loop, the right focus, the right support, and you like it a lot, you have the aptitude and the enthusiasm, I think you can get to a hireable level with 600 hours. However, life happens. It doesn't always work, even for the people who have the best intentions. So we can kind of round up to 1,000. And then there's job search times and stuff like that, and how people use their time unwisely on the wrong things, like trying to put out applications instead of just putting your applications in the right place. We're not going to count that either. We're talking about just learning web development. I'm going to say 600 hours if you have everything in place, and then it just grows from there. So let's talk about that. 3 hours. All right, let's just say, doesn't matter what days of the week these are, but we'll try to make it look a little like a calendar. So we've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Now, you should definitely take at least one day off. There's lots of bad things you can do to yourself if you code too much. First of all, there's only so much you can fit in your brain and only so many connections you can make at a time. There's also just the physicality of you sitting at a desk or on a couch or in a dumb position for many, 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 many hours. You need to give it some time. That's why I suggest these smaller amounts of time. Now, somebody could definitely do 6 hours a day, I think, if they were really excited about it, or they didn't have the need to have a part-time job or a full-time job during it. Maybe you're a young person who lives at home, or maybe your spouse can handle things while you're learning, or who knows what sort of situation you're in. Maybe you're in the hospital and you're stuck there in a bed and you have plenty of time to learn. So we'll talk about that later. But okay, so 6 days, you could think about that. So what is that? 3 times 6, 18. I don't know. Maybe I will just write this down as we go. Do some hardcore math. Okay, so that's 18 hours. And then I'm just going to round up, and we can pretend this is a month. So 24 days. Okay, so 24 days total. And you could say 3 hours a day. Maybe that's easier. 3 times 24. Do y'all know what that is? I think it's 72. Let's check though. 3 times 24. Back when I was in elementary school, we had to learn the times tables. I don't know if you all did that. Okay, so we've got 72 hours there. And Yeah, maybe, should I make these smaller? I'm not sure. Oh, there's a lot of cars driving out there today. All right, so let's say that's 1 month, and then we've got a second month. Now, the other day when I was walking through this with Jewel, she was cringing about my color choices. So I'm going to try to make the colors a little bit better than they were before. So I'm going to make these, we're just going to do kind of a rainbow sort of color here. And yeah, so that's month 1. And this will be month 2. I mean, these could just be black and white, obviously, but anything that can help. Some people are colorblind. They can't even see the difference between some of these. But some of you, it might be helpful. So, all right. Let's see. 3 months. Whew, that yellow's rough. Based on the context here, I might need to just give it a little bit of shade there. Okay, so 3 months. While we're here, let's just talk about kind of how boot camps do it, coding boot camps, or people who try to really cram. You could imagine that this is like 10-hour days. So it can be done for the right people with the boot camp that's not terrible. And yeah, if the timing's right. I mean, it has been done. It can be done. There's plenty of historical evidence that it can be done. The problem is that there's a lot of kind of crappy boot camps that jumped on the bandwagon and gave everybody a bad name. But the history speaks for itself. There were boot camps that crammed all this stuff in and changed people's lives. Okay, so let's see. Month 4. Don't you love watching me just kind of pick out these colors? This is probably something I can just do and then fast forward when you're not looking. All right, this will have to do. And obviously I could just take a screenshot of this and put it there and tell you exactly the whole conclusion to this video. But I would stop here and say, if this is so much work for you to listen to and to think through this visually, it's just, it's freaking you out and you just want to get the information and get on with your life, you're probably going to be a terrible web developer. You're definitely going to be a terrible designer. So calm down. It's okay. This is what, 10, 15 minutes of your life? It's going to be okay. So if you look at this here, see, now I'm wondering, shouldn't my header here have been a lot bigger? Now I can read it. So timeline, so you could just imagine January, February, March, April, May, blah, 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 blah. Let's imagine this kind of across a bigger timeline. I'll just make these kind of gray. And we can say, what does this look like? What does a year look like? So that's a year. And you probably want to give yourself a buffer again, right? Like this is idealized. This is if you have everything working out well, timing in your life, family, support, all the right materials and things like that. All right, so if we're talking about 72 here, 72 hours, 3 times 24, 72 times 9 months. Okay, so about 650 hours. That's kind of tracking. When we did this before, I don't think we added up the actual hours. So this is idealized world where you're pumped, you've got support, you've got teachers, and you've got like the right books or the right courses, and you can get code feedback, and you can in the case of how I teach with more visual design involved, which I think makes it easier and makes everything kind of coalesce in a more holistic, natural way. But whatever it might be, maybe you have a really good college professor or something, or a tutor, or an older sibling, or maybe one of your parents is teaching you, or you're going to local meetups and you have a really good study buddy group. Like there's no one way to do this, but I think that there is a reality to how many hours that this needs to be. So if you can knock this out, then you have this buffer where who knows how the market's going to be. Are you personable? You might get on the line with somebody and freak out and just be terrible in interviews. So maybe you're going to have to be the sort of person that freelances for a while, or who knows. That's a bunch of other life stuff I could talk about in another video. But what Jewel and I were talking about was that this sounds nice. It's easy to sell that to somebody, right? Hey, do this thing for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, and somehow you'll be able to magically just become a web developer. So you could imagine this is about the same surface area as that. But we're humans, so what really ends up happening is things kind of slip through the cracks. After the beginning, people sometimes they don't want to do all the days anymore, and they start moving these days over. They think they kind of skipped them, or that these days just sort of disappeared or got moved or something. But they did get moved, yeah. They didn't get skipped, though, is my point. The point in me making this video. Every time you don't do one of these, it just gets moved on to some other point in your life that you probably won't have time for then either. And the other problem with this is I think that they become diminished as well. So the more you spread things out in a way where you're procrastinating or putting something off, the less you're building on that knowledge that you've been getting through all that exploration and all that practice. Try to make this look a little nice, a little organic here. So you could imagine, let's just say you're splitting it into twos. So that happens. Let's see, how long does this get? So you can see that this stretches out the actual timeline quite a bit. You're still putting in the time, but you might just be putting it in more sparsely. And that could be because you're working part-time. That could be because you've just had a child. That could be for all sorts of reasons. Maybe you're starting another business while you're learning. And so there's nothing wrong with it taking this long. If you look at places like Launch School, they'll just tell you straight up front, it's going to take this long. And in other cases, it's just that you're using your time in a way that doesn't make sense. You're just skipping around. Maybe you have ADHD. Maybe you have all sorts of other things in your life going on, right? Like it's hard to pay attention. Maybe you don't have the right why to really drive you. So many different reasons. It doesn't matter. I don't really care about your reasons. But what the deal is this is a long time. And so it's hard for us to see that if you don't visualize it. Because you think, I'm working hard. I'm making stuff. I'm making progress. I'm taking courses. I'm checking off that little green box at the end of the little course lesson. I'm making progress. However, what I see is a lot of people running through this whole gauntlet, and they're getting here, and they're getting here, and they're getting here, and they're getting here, and then they get to here, and then they come on Reddit and say, hey, when am I going to be good enough? And I'll say, well, can you make a website? And they say, well, not really. No, I can't. Well, you weren't actually progressing. So in other cases, people think this is happening, but all of these individual times, they're not really that 2 to 3 focused hours of time. They're YouTube, they're watching YouTube videos like this one right here. Although I think this one has a good return on investment. They are bouncing around between different tutorials, different articles, different ChatGPT prompts and answers. They're coding in coding sandboxes. They're on all of the different options out there in the world, jumping between books, saying, this book isn't making me feel good. I'm going to get a different book. And I know because I've been there. Okay, so it's not like I'm judging you. I just know the truth of it. So what happens here is these things sneak up on you. This is a third year. This is a long amount of time. It's really long. Like I meet people sometimes and they say, I went to computer science school, then I went to a boot camp, and I still don't know what to do. Will you help me? And I'm just like, I don't know what to tell you. There's something else wrong here. You should be able to learn this stuff. What you're doing is avoiding the difficulty, the frustration, the discomfort that happens when you sit down and just try stuff with the things what can you do with those things? And people just want to skip it. They want to somehow learn everything and then go back and be able to do the work. And it just doesn't work like that. So in reality, what's happening is people are spreading this out And well, I've seen it spread out for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I see all the time on the internet people saying, I've been trying to learn web development for 6 years and things like that. So it just depends how you want to do it. Like I said, I think there are legitimate ways to kind of put all of these things together in some kind of like boot campy thing. My general problem with that, which is just my personal angle on it, is I think that those are usually just taught in a way that is a little bit surface level. But I'm not against the idea that you could go to a boot camp and consolidate this time kind of vertically. Instead of working 2 to 3 hours a day, you work 9 hours a day, because that is going to compound, and being in the thick of it like that will have a real impact if done properly. So I just want to show all these options. This one just sneaks up on you and quickly becomes this one. So that's why people are paying so much money for accountability. And one of the major bonuses of a boot camp is that accountability. You have to show up, you have to be there, or like a school. And a lot of people want to be told what to do. They want to show up and be on camera so they can't leave. In many cases, why boot camp graduates successfully graduate is because of the expense. It's scary. They don't want to piss off their family. They don't want to feel stupid. And because they are forced to be there. However, graduating shouldn't really be the goal, because a lot of people graduate with no confidence, no skills, and they didn't really get all the things in these boxes. They might have come through and gone through all these lessons, but did they really get that 2 to 3 hours or 9 hours of focused actual learning where you are being forced to take a few simple things and make those brain connections and actually learn how to think like a programmer, as opposed to learning what to type to emulate common tasks that we do as web developers. In case you can't tell, I didn't make a script for this or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of go for it and just talk about this, because it can really slip away from you. You start doing something because it sounds interesting, it sounds creative, you're excited about it, you heard that it was a good field, and for whatever reason, you can't do it if you totally hate it. But what people do is they just hang on to this dream and they just draw it out and draw it out and draw it out. And I meet a lot of people, and it's sad, and this might sound like I'm making this up, but I meet a lot of people who have been learning for all of this time, and then I assess them and I look at what they're capable of, and I talk them through some practical coding situations, like, can you make a basic website? Do you know about semantic HTML? Tell me about CSS and how that works. Can you make this little CSS layout? Can you use array methods to change some data around? Can you just plan out a simple project? And the answer is no. And it's kind of sad and scary. But it's just life, whatever. We try to make the best of it. But basically what I have to tell them is, like, you're going to have to start over and you're going to have to do this thing. So what's the point of doing all of this drawn out stuff over years when somebody like me is just going to tell you have to do this again anyway at the end? So just start out with the right materials. And I'm not saying I'm the only person with the answer here. I'm just saying there are ways to learn things efficiently in a way that actually tests your skill as you're going and forces you to build that confidence. And there are ways to just kind of usher you through a bunch of courses, a bunch of little gamified sandbox things, and come out the other end with no skills and having wasted so much time, and then you feel bad about it too. I mean, it's embarrassing. I felt like that when I've been up at 5 a.m. just trying to do this thing I totally don't understand, and just thinking of all the nights that I've done that before and feeling so stupid. And so, I mean, I had to institute this to myself. I basically was this person now that I'm seeing it. Now that I'm seeing it on the screen. Well, not exactly. I mean, what I did was I worked really hard, really deep on this part. HTML, CSS. I was building really good websites, and I was putting in a ton of time. But what I did in my life, I didn't mean to be telling you this story, but now that I'm here, what I did in my life is I kind of skipped all the fundamental programming stuff, got a job, was able to pull things off, and then, like, tried to learn all this stuff I didn't understand at all and stretched that over many, 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 many years. More years than we have on the board here, even. And then, essentially, at the end of all of this mess of, I learned a lot of stuff on the job, but like it was not efficient. I would not recommend it for anyone. In the end, I had to just go back and like create my own little regiment and like learn all the stuff I should have learned. So I'm speaking from personal experience, from my own personal life, and also from hundreds and hundreds of people I've interviewed who are bootcamp graduates, bootcamp current people, self-taught people, computer science graduates, stuff like that. So here's a whole bunch of different timelines you can choose from. I personally think that this timeline is the best, and I more specifically think this timeline with intertwined visual design and web development is the best. But that's my personal thoughts on it. Consider this when you think you're going to choose a path, and how long have you been on that path, and how much success are you having? Are you actually able to design and build web applications? Are you actually able to jump into a code base and help a team refine a feature or design and plan out and code a feature? Are you placing yourself in reality, in the real needs of the businesses that you want to work for, or in the needs of the products that you want to create? And where are you fitting in this timeline? Because you can make it be 3 months. If all of the ingredients are there and everything's timed right, you can learn a shitload of stuff in 3 months. You can make it work in 6 months. You can make it work in 9 months. You can make it work in a year. But if you're starting to take these little blocks of time and stretch them out, water them down, spread them out over time, just be aware, this is what's going to happen. And the more you spread them out, the less they'll stick, the less of a cohesive story you'll be building. And at some point, there's such diminishing returns that you just shouldn't even do it. You should give up. You should stop. You should do something else. Either wait until something changes in your life that you have the time, or just accept that this is not for you. This is not something that you're interested in. This is not something you have the time for. Because that's fine too. There's tons of different jobs out there. Okay, as I'm editing this, I want to go over just a couple more things here. Now, I think that some people out there on the internet think I am some kind of evil snake oil salesman who is like trying to trick people into not going to computer science school. And that is just not true. I think that there are tons of good reasons to go to computer science school. I just don't think that if you're trying to be a web developer, you should go to computer science school, because it's just the wrong school for you, right? Just like you shouldn't go to graphic design school. They're both going to have a lot of overlap. But if you're trying to design and build web applications, you don't necessarily need to know about how compilers work. And it also depends what sort of time period you are in your life. When I went to college, I was 18. I went right after high school, learned how to be an adult, sort of, still working on it. Definitely took the long road on that. But it was important, and the time was really important to me to be there. However, I would not necessarily want to go to that same college now as an adult. I wouldn't want to go to English classes. I wouldn't want to learn how to use clay. I wouldn't want to learn about, color theory or photography or whatever, all of the things you might learn, drawing naked people, learning about gestures. Those were all great for foundations because I wanted to be an artist for my career, right? For my big picture. But if I was going to go learn about web development, I would want to learn just about web development. Just like if I wanted to go learn screen printing, I wouldn't go to art school. I would go to screen printing class and I'd learn everything about screen printing, and then I'd try to get a job at a screen printing place and some kind of apprenticeship. My opinion is that college is a much bigger idea. It's about preparing people to be good people across the board, not about going to learn specific skills. So when you go to computer science school, let's just take some of these. How many classes do you really have, right? You have a certain amount of classes every day. You don't really learn any of this. Maybe a little. And you learn that maybe, I'd say third or fourth year, maybe. Some HTML and CSS. You're going to learn a ton of other stuff. And, maybe a little bit about the internet or something like here. And you're going to learn some humanities, and you're going to learn some history courses, probably some kind of public speaking, some data structures, some compiler stuff, some like IT type of stuff. And then somewhere in your third year, they might kind of like dump some sort of JavaScript project on you, have you kind of do that with a group, and then maybe some kind of like system architecture in here. And then you'll have like a big group project, and the teacher who doesn't know anything about what's going on will be like, okay, guys, go learn React or Rails or whatever. And so, I guess I need to put this down here. I don't know. So this is sort of what that might look like if you're going to go to computer science school. So there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you should be clear that going to computer science school to learn web development is a little weird. And if somebody wants to fight me on that, or like get on the line and have a like serious conversation about that and prove me wrong, please, I would love to have that conversation. I'm not trying to be right here. I'm just trying to reflect what I see in actual real life from people I know. And so there's a lot of stuff in here, and you will get a degree, which will then prove that you have a degree of knowledge given to you by the state or United States or whatever country you're from, and that might help you get through screenings and stuff like that for getting jobs. And it depends what kind of job you want, right? I do not want you building drones and driverless cars as like a crappy web developer. I want you to definitely go to computer science school. I want you to learn all about it. I want you to take classes on ethics, and I want you to take classes on all sorts of things so that you can learn the science of using computers to solve problems. The web is just a little tiny slice of that pie, and I've enjoyed that slice of the pie. But you need to just be honest about yourself. There's all sorts of people on the internet who are like, I can't get a job, and then people say, well, just get a master's in computer science, or go back to school and get a computer science degree. No, just fucking learn how to build websites. Seriously. No amount of going back to school is going to make you not be shitty at the job you're trying to get. So that's what you should think about. If you want to get a job as a web developer or a software engineer, maybe you should learn how to do that. So I don't know if that sounds angry or crass or something. It just blows my mind sometimes. You have to actually know how to do it. You can't just keep getting degrees or something, because I meet people all the time who go through this, and you know what I do? I tell them, okay, if you want to do this, it's time to do this, because this is how you learn how to be a web developer, like this. And this stuff actually might hinder you, because you might be, well, where do I put the data science? What, bro? Okay, well, where do I put my structures? What about my OOP? I learned object-oriented programming. Now what? How do I build something? So in a way, jamming you with all of this information that's out of context from like old boring teachers and out of date, like, community colleges and state colleges and all this shit, like, it's just a distraction if you're trying to become a web developer. But I also think that if you go to college for computer science and then you're the sort of person who's a go-getter, and like during that time you put in a bunch of this sort of time, you might be like a superhero of coding. So there's all sorts of ways to do it. I'm not saying not to go to computer science school. I'm just saying, remember that computer science school is not web developer school. It is to go study for 4 years the science of using computers to solve problems. And that doesn't mean that when you go to college and you cram a bunch of online schooling that you're going to get that experience. So going to some kind of video college and trying to get it all done in 18 months or something just to say you have a degree is still not going to be the same as this. And time again, that's what I see. People go get their degrees and they come back and they say, okay, but now how do I learn how to build websites? So just keep that reality in mind. And one other thing I wanted to talk about here, which I should make a whole video on, is this is real. Like, there's only so many times in the day. So you could kind of block out what your day looks like, right? Like maybe this is you sleeping. Maybe this is breakfast, getting your kids ready for school, or whatever it is you might do. Going out to the car to turn on the car to make sure it warms up because you live in the snow. Driving to your job that you have. Going to your job that you have. Driving back home. There's only so many hours in a day. Picking up your dog from the place. Blah, blah, blah. All these things happen. These are reality. And then you come here and you're like, gotta go back to sleep. So what if you only have this many hours? Well, you're gonna have to decide how you want to use it. And that's where this starts coming in here. Because people decide, oh, well, what I'd like to do is play video games. And trust me, I've sunk a lot of time into, Tony Hawk, original Zelda, Mario Brothers, all sorts of things. But the people these days, they play a lot of video games and they watch a lot of Netflix and they watch a lot of YouTube. And if you're going to actually try to find this time for real, 18 hours a week, 72 hours a month, and you want to really learn web development, you're going to have to make web development your new video game. You're going to have to turn this here into a game, and you're going to have to find a way to enjoy it and get pumped about this part of your life that's going to happen afterwards. When you get to, change your job, when you get to change maybe your lifestyle, change your autonomy at work, change those sorts of things. Make this a game now so that later, the future you, that person that we don't give a shit about, that person that lives in a world full of trash and plastic bottles and rotten teeth and no money in the bank, that future person, a future us, you're going to have to make some sort of sacrifice now, no matter what you're learning and no matter how you're trying to better yourself. But if you start out the process and then you say, this is pretty fun, but you know what, I'm going to just play video games for 7 hours a day. Well, you know what's going to happen because I showed you the timeline here. All right, that's my wacky timeline conversation I wanted to have. So thanks to Jewel for going through that with me the other day and inspiring this. And I'm curious what all of you think about this. What was your timeline like? Did you find some magic way to do it? Were you just already somebody who had a lot of aptitude or a lot of enthusiasm who found the magic perfect book? I know the magic perfect course that really set me off. What did you go to a really cool college? Did you have a parent or family member who helped speed things up? Or are you one of these people who just tried for years and years and years and bounced between all these different tutorials and courses? Yeah, I'd be interested to know what you have to say. All right, bye.